Yes. So I guess you have gone through the case study and you have understood that if you want to analyze any data, if you want to do analysis of any kind of data set, you have to have some uh, basic assumption to start with. And then you'll consider that basic assumption either as true or false. And then you'll try to prove or then you'll try to test whether the basic assumption is correct or not. So in our normal case, this basic assumption is nothing but your null hypothesis. So we are going to go into details of what is null hypothesis and how to form the null hypothesis. But the basic assumption about my population is the null hypothesis, based on which I'll test my sample and then I'll see whether my sample follows the same behavior or not. So that is what is the hypothesis means. So the last four lines are very important. Where they have explained what is H naught and what is HA. In hypothesis testing, we begin by making a tentative assumption about a population parameter. So this is a very important statement. Why we need hypothesis? Because it's a basic assumption about a population parameter. It may be a mean, it may be a standard deviation. Generally, it is a mean value, mean of some variable. So it's a tentative assumption about population mean, generally 99% cases. And then we need to check that tentative assumption, and that method of checking that tentative assumption is nothing but hypothesis testing. Now this tentative assumption is called as null hypothesis, and it is denoted by H naught. It is not H0, it is called as H naught. We then define another hypothesis called as alternative hypothesis, which is opposite of what is stated in the null hypothesis. So the alternate hypothesis is denoted by HA. So HA is exactly opposite of H naught. HA is exactly opposite of H naught. So now we have two statements. One is H naught and second is HA, which is exactly opposite to H naught. So either H naught can be true or HA can be true. There cannot be any situation where both are true or both are false. That is not possible. So either of H naught and HA has to be true and the second one has to be false. And that is what we do in hypothesis testing. Now, even in our example, if you have seen what is my H naught is, P is less than equal to 0.50. So HA has to be P is greater than, because less than and equal to all cases I'm considering in H naught. So the only case left which is opposite of H naught is P is greater than 0.50. That is my HA. Now, generally, forget about this specific example, but generally, when we say null hypothesis, how to remember, when we say null hypothesis, the notation is H naught. What I say is H naught. So whenever we try to state the null hypothesis, that null hypothesis statement should have not word in that. That's an indication. Because it is H naught, the null hypothesis statement should have the not word in the statement of H naught. And then the alternate hypothesis will not have that not word. So we'll come to that, how to form the hypothesis, but that is a basic thumb rule you can say in analysis, that when I say H not, because it is not, the statement also has to have the word not in it. Okay. So today we are going to start with the hypothesis testing. And as you can see on the title slide itself, we have two different branches using for which we can do the hypothesis testing. So one is using normal distribution, which we have already done. We can use the normal distribution formula for hypothesis testing. And we are going to solve one of the problems for normal distribution also for hypothesis testing in today's session. And you must be aware of this formula of Z x minus mu upon sigma that we have used to calculate the distance. The only addition is divided by root n, which is the standard error formula, because now we have to consider standard error for hypothesis testing. Now, parallel to normal distribution, we have a t distribution. In analysis, parallel to normal distribution, we have a t distribution, where we can do the hypothesis testing for one sample and two samples. Now, when to go for normal distribution and when to go for t distribution. As we have solved a lot of problems for normal distribution, if you can remember that in the problem statement of normal distribution, we always mention the mean and the standard deviation of the population. That with the population mean as this and standard deviation as this, what percentage of population is between 80 to 150, for example. So we always know the population parameters like mu and standard deviation. So always we have to ask the question that if you are aware of mu and standard deviation, if you know mean and standard deviation. If answer is yes, then you go for normal distribution. You calculate Z, use Z table and do the conclusion. And if the answer is no, that you don't know the population parameters, then you have to go for t-distribution. That means you are dealing with samples. So if you are dealing with population itself, you know the population parameters, go for Z table. And if you don't know the population parameters, if you are dealing with the samples, go for t-distribution and use t-tables. So that is the basic diversion, when to use normal distribution, when to use t-distribution. Now, in case of t-distribution, again, we have two separate methods. One is one sample t-test and second is two sample t-test. So in analysis, we have to deal with multiple samples. So the basic case is one sample. If I have only one sample data set available with me, and then I have to analyze that data set. Or second case, I may have two data sets with me or two samples from same population with me, and then I have to analyze both the samples. Either I have to compare one sample with another sample, or I have to analyze both the samples together. Now, again, in that case, in case of two samples, I can have dependent samples or I can have independent samples. When I say dependent samples, that means my objects are remaining same. I'm just reading the objects at different times of point. And independent samples means my list of objects itself is different. So we'll come to the explanation of all these things. So that is about two samples. Now, in analysis, we have to also deal with more than two samples. In some cases, we may have 3 samples, 4 samples, 5 samples, 6 samples, even 7 and 8 samples. So in those cases, we cannot go for normal distribution or t-distribution. For that, we need F distribution. If we have more than 2 samples, we have to use F distribution. And then for analysis of F distribution, we have to use analysis of variance, which is called as ANOVA. So that is how we have to use appropriate method for appropriate situation. If we have only one sample and if the population parameters are known, go for Z method. If you are having only one sample and if the population parameters are not known, go for T method. If you have if you have two samples and which are dependent, go for paired sample t-test. If you have two samples which are independent of each other, go for independent sample t-test. If you have 3 or more than 3 samples, go for ANOVA. So likewise, we can decide which method to be used for hypothesis testing and further analysis based on how many samples we have and what kind of population parameters we know about those samples. So now we will try to solve a few examples using normal distribution and one sample t-test, even two sample t-tests in case of paired sample, but we will not solve any examples on pen and paper using pen and paper for independent sample t-test because the formula part is a bit complex one, and we'll be using all these methods using Excel also. So that is what we are going to cover in today's session. Now we are going to club these two things. The first thing which we have discussed about the hypothesis statement formation, how to form H0 and H1 or HA, and then how to test that hypothesis using one of these methods. So first we have to see, or first we have to state the hypothesis, and then we have to select the appropriate method to test this hypothesis. And that is the complete concept of hypothesis testing. Fine, so we'll start with the presentation now. Hypothesis testing. Now, hypothesis testing is a framework for decision making. Why it is called as a framework for decision making? Because at the end of the hypothesis testing process, we decide whether to accept or reject the hypothesis. That's why it is called as a framework for decision making. And as it is a framework, it is a structured way of implementing the process. So step number 1 is state your null hypothesis first, read the problem statement. Again, that's why from day 1 I'm telling you, defining the problem, defining the requirements is the most important part. If you miss something in defining your problem, you'll miss everything and the analysis will go wrong. Again, the first step in hypothesis testing is state your null hypothesis, and that null hypothesis will be based on your problem definition. Whatever text is available to you, from that text you will form your null hypothesis. Once you have formed the null hypothesis, the alternate hypothesis is exactly opposite to the null hypothesis. Now in some books and by some researchers, the null hypothesis notation is used as HA, some has used as H1. So it depends on you. You can use any notation. You have to just remember which one is null and which one is alternate. Once you have H0 and H1 in place, then you have to fix the confidence level. The confidence level by default is 95%, but the confidence level for your analysis can vary from 40% to 100%, any value you can take. So generally confidence level, when I say the term confidence level, this term is linked with significance level. This term is linked with significance level, because at the end, what we do in analysis is we try to check what is the significance of my analysis based on what is my confidence level. So always we use in explanation, though we use the term confidence level, in calculations and in Excel or in any tools, you will find significance level is more important than confidence level. So significance level, what is significance level? If I say confidence level is 95%, if I say confidence level is 95%, then my significance level will be 5%. That means at least the whatever observations I have, if I want to have the confidence level of 95% in my observations, in my data, in my decision, then the hypothesis should be tested at 5% of significance level. At 5% of significance level, that is 0.05. So we'll come to that part also. So if my confidence level is 99%, then my significance level comes to 0.01. If my confidence level is, I'm testing at 90%, then my significance level comes at 0.1, and so on. Then based on whatever H0, H1 you have, and you have fixed the significance level also, you have to collect the appropriate data. In normal cases, the data will be available to you, it will be given to you. You have to select the appropriate statistical method and implement, and then come to the conclusion. So this is a 6-step approach for implementing this decision-making framework of hypothesis testing. Now, how many methods we have? As we have said, use statistical methods, step number 5. So we have 4 important methods for 1 and 2 samples. So first method is using confidence level intervals. First method is using confidence level intervals. So as you can see, we have an interval of confidence level. And based on interval, then we'll decide whether to accept or reject the H0. Now in this confidence level interval formula, the first term is X bar. So if you have data, you can calculate X bar easily. The next term is standard deviation. If you have data, you can calculate standard deviation also. Root n, number of observations, is also known if you have data. Only thing is you have to you don't know the CL value, that is confidence level constant. So I'll tell you how to calculate confidence level constants also for different intervals. Then this is the first method, and in this first method, if you can see, the symbol is plus or minus. So it is like if I'm getting some answers as 5 plus or minus 2, that means I'm creating the confidence level interval of 5 minus 2 is 3 and 5 plus 2 is 7. So I'm creating an interval of few values between 3 and 7. So likewise, I'll get some confidence level interval values using this formula, and then I have to use that interval to test my hypothesis. So that we'll see in details in further slides. This is my method number 1. Method number 2 is using Z value. Method number 2 is using Z value, which we have already done, but still we'll solve one example using Z value again for hypothesis testing. Method number 3 is using T value, which will be looked in details using T table. And last is method number 4 is using P value analysis. Now in all these 4 methods, we are going to look at all these 4 methods in today's session. The first method is called as interval estimation method, and the next 3 methods are called as point estimation method. Because we are using a complete interval, a set of values for hypothesis testing, that is called as interval estimation method. And because we are using single points, either Z value or T value or P value, we are using single values to analyze and to test my hypothesis. So it is called as point estimation method. So that's how we have 1 interval estimation method and 3 point estimation methods for 1 and 2 samples of hypothesis testing. If we have more than 2 samples, then we have to go for F estimation. Okay, that will be looked in details in tomorrow's session. So this is all about the introduction of what is hypothesis, hypothesis statements, H0, H1, hypothesis testing framework, important steps, and interval estimation and point estimation methods. So now we'll start with the process. Example: average salary of IT professionals working in Hinjewadi phase 1. Suppose I want to calculate average salary of all the IT professionals working in Hinjewadi phase 1 Pune. Now in this case, before starting the process, I may be having some assumption, maybe I have read somewhere, some report, some company report, some financial analysis, I don't know. But I have some assumption that I believe that IT professionals' average salary is 85,000. So when I say average salary of IT professionals in Hinjewadi Phase 1 Pune is 85,000, that means my statement comes as mu is equal to 85,000. So if mu is equal to 85,000, how I can write this in a statement format? Because I have mentioned that H naught, as the word not is there, even the statement should have no or not kind of words. So when I say mu equal to 85K, that means I am trying to say there is no difference between average salary and 85K. There is no difference between average salary and 85K. So always my H naught is a negative statement. And that's why H1 becomes the alternative hypothesis becomes the opposite of H naught. So in this case, my null hypothesis is mu is equal to 85K and H1 becomes mu is not equal to 85K. So it is something else. It is other than 85K. Now, can we make above statement with 100% confidence? Can I be 100% confident about this statement? Answer is no. I cannot be 100% confident because I don't have population data and even I have not done the sample analysis also. So answer is no. So we need to define the appropriate confidence level or significance level, that what confidence I have that the H naught is true or H1 is true. That also I have to define. So consider I am checking this statement as 95% confidence. So my significance level comes as 0.05. As we have discussed how to calculate significance level, that is the remaining portion of your confidence level. So generally in terms of discussion, we use confidence level as the term, but in terms of calculations, the significance level is always checked. Okay, and that is major part of p-value analysis. Generally, we compare p-value with the significance level. So we'll come to that part when we'll discuss the p-value analysis. Now collect data. If you have formed H0, H1, you know what is the value of alpha. Then collect the data and use appropriate statistical method or tool, and then conclude by accepting or rejecting H0 or H1. So that is how the process we are going to follow. So suppose the same example I am taking, average salary of IT professionals working in Hinjewadi Phase 1 Pune. So my H0 becomes mu is equal to 85K, H1 becomes mu is not equal to 85K, alpha is 0.05 because I'm trying to test at 95% confidence level. Now collect data. Suppose I'm selecting 10 companies because I have to go for sample, and then 100 employees. So maybe 10 employees from each company as a representative. And so I have 100 data points. So with those 100 data points, then I'll apply some statistical methods. Suppose now we are going to implement method number 1, which is using confidence level intervals. Now we have discussed the formula part. What is this meaning of this formula, and then how I'll get the interval or the set of few values to test. And the only part was missing is the confidence level constant. So these are the confidence level constants. For 90%, the confidence level constant is 1.65. For 95%, the confidence level constant is 1.96. And for 99%, the confidence level constant is 2.57. Now this is okay that you know what is the confidence level constant for 90%, 95% and 99%. But then tomorrow if somebody asks you to test your data at 85% confidence or 98% confidence or maybe 89% confidence, then how to know the constant value? So I'll tell you how to find the constants of confidence levels. And for that, we use Z table. For this calculation, we use Z table. Okay. Now, when I say that I'm using this method of X bar plus or minus CL into sigma upon root n to calculate a range of values, what this range of values indicates, it is the set of accept values. It is this set of accept values. So what I have to do is, then comes the rule in the picture. The rule says whatever is your H0, the mu is equal to 85K is my H0. Whatever is your assumption, for example, your assumption, if that assumption belongs to set of accept values, if your assumption belongs to your set of accept values, then your assumption is correct. So the same thing is written in rule format. If my 85, which is the H0, belongs to the 95% confidence level, if I'm checking at 95%, if you are checking at 90%, it will be 90% confidence level. So whatever is the confidence level you are using, that constant. If your assumption belongs to, now this symbol is belongs to, if your assumption belongs to this set of accept values, then we fail to reject H0. We fail to reject H0, that means H0 I am considering as correct for my data, available data. But we never say we accept H0, or we never say H0 is correct. As analyst, you are not allowed to tell what is correct. As analyst, you are not allowed to tell what is right. As analyst, you are allowed to tell what is not correct and what you fail to reject. So when I say I want to accept H0, that my basic assumption mu equal to 85K seems to be right because that is part of the set of accept values, but still you cannot say that I accept H0. You have to say I fail to reject H0 based on the available data, whatever data is available to me. I fail to reject H0 based on the data values I have. If you don't know, tomorrow, if I get some more data values, if I get some more samples from the same population, I may have to reject H0 also. So cannot be 100% sure. Your own confidence level is at 95%. You're still keeping a chance of 5% for failure. So you have to always say we fail to reject H0. As analyst, you will submit this analysis to the client that we fail to reject H0, whether to accept or not the H0 part and go ahead with that, it is client's responsibility. As an analyst, you will say, I fail to reject H0 or I reject H0. Only these two statements you should mention in your analysis always. Okay, fine. Now we'll try to use this formula and we'll try to execute one example. Okay. So before that, I just want to discuss this confidence level term for one example, so that you will understand what is the importance of confidence level. Now consider following examples. If I'm recruiting a few freshers for Wipro, and that is one example, that is one scenario. And in second scenario, there is some supplier who is providing metal sheets to ISRO for some space program. Now, what I'll do as part of selection process for recruitment of Wipro, I'll give some 100 lines of code to write, and then I'll see how the candidates are writing the code, and looking at the level of the code, logic written in the code structure and everything, then I'll decide which candidate to select. So my basic assumption is candidate know the coding and they can write 100 lines of code easily. That is my basic assumption. That's why I have called in for selection process. And the basic assumption for second problem becomes the thickness of metal sheet is 10 mm, because that is my requirement of my space program as an ISRO manager. My requirement is the metal sheet thickness has to be 10 mm. Now, in case of first scenario, when I say that candidates know coding and they can write 100 lines of code, even if some candidates or one candidate writes 5 to 6 lines of wrong code, or if that candidate makes some small mistakes in that code, instead of starting a loop from I equal to 0 and then ending at I equal to 10, maybe that candidate has started the loop with I equal to 1. So one iteration is less. So some problem is there. But still looking at overall code, still looking at overall logic, still looking at overall code structure, I may go ahead and I may select that candidate, even if the code is a bit wrong, and even if there are problems in the syntax and maybe semantic, but still I'll go ahead with that candidate, because I know that even if that much of error is there in the code, I can accept that error and I can take that employee, I can take that candidate. So confidence level also shows how much error you are ready to accept. Confidence level also shows how much error you are ready to accept and how much error you can take and go ahead with in your business. But in case of second scenario, now you look at second scenario, the thickness of metal sheet is 10 mm. That is my null hypothesis. Now, even if the supplier gives the metal sheet with thickness of 10.000001, even that much of deviation is not accepted, because it is for space program of ISRO. That 0.00001 of deviation on Earth may result into something drastic in space. So I cannot accept, or I'm not ready to accept any kind of error, any kind of deviation from my null hypothesis in terms of second scenario. So my appetite of risk, my appetite of taking risk is less in second scenario, almost null, and my appetite is enough to accept some error, to accept some risk is more in case of first scenario. So all this is linked to your confidence level, and that's why confidence level is very important. So the capacity of accepting the claim, the capacity of accepting the claim with some kind of error or with some kind of faults is very important, and that is called as level of confidence. So when I say 95% confidence, I'm okay with 5% of error. I'm ready to accept that 5% of chance. I'm ready to accept and go ahead with 5% of risk. But when I say 99.99% confidence, I am ready to accept only 0.01% of error. So what kind of error you are ready to accept as a business, that describes your confidence level in your analysis. So that is very important term in terms of analysis, confidence level. And if confidence level is 95%, your significance level comes at 0.5%. Because when I say 95%, then my data I need to check if it is significant with my confidence level at 0.05 at least. So even if my significance level is crossing by 0.1, that is 0.06, in that case, I have to reject my H0. So I'll come to that part with p-value analysis, but this is the main thing of confidence level, the term confidence level. Now, suppose this is a problem. An engineer measured the hardness of 25 pieces of some iron pieces that were subcritically annealed, and the resulting data are, the 25 pieces data is given to you, and what you have to do is you have to verify that if the hardness, the mean hardness, if the mean hardness of all such iron pieces is 170. What is my H0? Yes, who is that? Pranali? Okay, so what is your H0? Your H0 is mu equal to 170. Your H0 is mu equal to 170. So I need to test whether my H0 belongs to my 95% confidence level of interval. So the interval of values at 95%, the accept range of values at 95% are between 168.47 to 176.56. All these values, if I'm considering mean of all those 25 pieces, all these values of means are accepted to me. So if there is one item out of 25 of value 168.5, I'll accept that item as part of consignment. If second item is at 176.1, I'll accept that item as part of consignment. If third item is at 170, I'll accept that item. So all the values in between 168.4 to 176.5 are the accepted values of hardness, or are the accepted values of hardness. And if 170 belongs to accept a range of 95% confidence level intervals, that means my basic assumption is correct. My basic assumption H0 mu equal to 170 is correct. That means we fail to reject H0. I'll not say I'll accept H0. We say we fail to reject H0. We fail to reject H0. Now just check at 99% and 90% also. Do we fail to reject H0 or result is something else?
We fail to reject the H0 for both of them.
Yes. So if you go ahead and if you calculate the interval comes something like this. For 90% it is 169 to 175, and then for 99% it is 167 to 177. So in all cases 170 belongs to the interval of accept range. That means even at 90% or 95% or 99%, we fail to reject H0. My basic assumption is correct. You test it at whatever confidence level you want to test, but the basic assumption is correct. We fail to reject H0. So this is the answer. What is my H0? Mu equal to 15.7. What is my H1? Mu is not equal to 15.7. At 90%, 95%, 96%, these are my interval values. And 15.7 does not belong to any of the intervals. So we reject H0 at all mentioned level of confidence. Yes, are you getting the same answers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So we'll go ahead, even if you have completed one calculation at least for one confidence level, that is sufficient. The remaining you can do afterwards. So we'll go ahead now.
So,
Yes.
you think, going to previous area. So in this case, we say that we reject the H0
Correct.
and we fail to reject the H1 or HA.
That
Right?
is, you don't need to say that. When you say we reject H0, that is understood that you are going ahead with the alternate hypothesis. Effect of sample size. What is the effect of larger sample size? So I'll consider one problem. H0 is equal to mu is equal to 85. That is my null hypothesis. So H1 becomes mu is not equal to 85. And alpha I'm keeping constant, 95%. So significance level is 0.05. The only change is in first scenario, I'm considering 100 data points in my sample with same mean and same standard deviation, 88 and 20. But in second scenario, the second researcher has taken 10,000 data points. So sample size is 10,000 for second researcher and sample size is 100 for first researcher. Both researchers are trying to do research on same thing of H0 and H1 with same mean and same standard deviation. So we are just trying to check what is the effect of sample size. So substitute all these values and just try to tell me what is your understanding of effect of sample size. Any guess? Okay. Yes, Sumit.
It gives a broader. It will give the broader range. Sorry.
Okay, broader range. Okay. Okay, Nandan. Anyone else? Okay, fine. So if you calculate the interval, if you actually calculate the interval with 100 data points comes as 84.08 to 91.92. And if you calculate the interval for 10,000 data points, it comes as 87.61 to 88.39. Now my H0 says mu equal to 85. And 85 belongs to my accept range of first scenario, but 85 does not belong to my accept range of second scenario. So one researcher with same data, same mean, same standard deviation at same confidence level will fail to reject the H0, whereas the second researcher will reject the H0. So we'll have two opposite conclusions or decisions for same or similar kind of data from same population with same mean and same standard deviation. And that is just because larger sample size. So as you get larger sample size, you tend to go close to the accuracy. That is a thumb rule in analysis. If you take larger sample size, you tend to go close to the accurate analysis. So always you should have larger sample space. Now, again, this larger word is a subjective term. For me, maybe 1,000 is larger sample space. For somebody else, 10,000 may be larger sample space. For some problem, even 10 will be the larger sample space. So again, there are some logic. There is some logic. There are some rules. If you follow those rules, you can come to know for your kind of analysis what should be the standard sample size. And if you go to Google and if you try to find answers for this question, sample size calculation for analysis, you'll get a lot of theories and a lot of methods for that. But the rule says you should have larger sample size for analysis, which tends to go close to the accurate analysis. Fine. So that is the effect of sample size. Likewise, you can test the effect of different confidence levels also. You can test the effect of different mean values also. And that analysis you can do in your free time. So this is one example I'm giving. If I just tweak one part of the formula, how the complete conclusion changes from one end to another end. Fine. So we'll go ahead now. So this is why it is always good to have large sample size for finding probably more accurate results. Okay. Now that is we have finished with the first method of interval estimation method. So you know how to calculate that interval and then how to accept or reject the hypothesis which you have formed based on your interval values. Now second, third and fourth, which is Z value, T value and P value, which are point estimation method, where we are talking about a single point to accept or reject the hypothesis. Now first is Z value method. Now we have already discussed the normal distribution and we know how to calculate Z. So and you are aware of this diagram also. So when I say for certain value, now this is X bar in my normal distribution, and for 95%, this alpha is 0.05, that is 95%. At 95%, my Z is 1.96. From the Z table itself, we have came to know that at 95%, my Z value is 1.96. Now that 1.96 is on both the sides of X bar. So I should consider plus 1.96 to minus 1.96. So this all becomes my accept region. This all becomes my accept region in case of Z analysis. And anything beyond this 1.96 on both the sides becomes part of reject region. Becomes part of reject region. Now suppose if I tell you that there is some xi, suppose if I tell you there is some xi, and for that xi the Z value is 1.5. Suppose for that specific xi in my data set, the Z value of that xi is 1.5. How to calculate that Z value? We know that xi minus mu upon standard deviation. That is the formula for normal distribution. Xi minus mu upon standard deviation. Okay, fine. Suppose the Z value is 1.5. What is the meaning of this Z equal to 1.5? If I try to plot this point in my distribution, 1.5 is less than 1.96. So 1.5 will come somewhere here. This is my xi. Correct? If I try to plot xi in my distribution, because Z value is 1.5, it is less than 1.96. So I have to plot my xi somewhere here. That means my xi is in accept region. That is, my xi is in accept region. So I'll accept xi based hypothesis. Okay, so that is a basic concept of point estimation. We always compare one value with the accept range value. Now in case of Z, we know the constant is 1.96, so we can directly compare our xi's Z value with 1.96. Okay, so we'll go ahead with that. That's why if you can look at the rule says if mod of Z is less than 1.96, in our case 1.5 is less than 1.96. Yes, the condition is right. 1.5 is less than 1.96. So we fail to reject H0. That means we are going to go ahead with the basic assumption. We think our basic assumption is correct. So we fail to reject H0. Now why it is mod of Z? Because the Z value can be negative also. The Z value can be negative also. So if it is minus 1.5, still it will be in accept range, because we are now going to compare minus 1.5 with minus 1.96. And that's why we are saying only 1.96 and we are comparing it with mod Z. And this is the kind of thumb rule in statistics. You should always remember this in analysis, any kind of analysis. You go to T analysis, F analysis. If in this kind of rules, right now we are saying mod Z and we are comparing it with 1.96. And then we are saying we failed to reject H0. The result is same. We failed to reject H0. So what is this mod Z? This mod Z is calculated value. You will use some formula. Z is equal to xi minus mu divided by standard deviation. If you want to go more close to the accurate value, maybe you'll divide it by root n, that is standard error. So that is how you can calculate Z. So always the left hand side is calculated value, and you compare it with right hand side, which is a constant. So 1.96 is a constant for confidence level of 95%. Now, and from where you have got this constant, that 1.96 is the constant for 95%, is from table. This constant you have got from Z table. In case of T, it will be from T table. In case of F, it will be from F table. And in analysis, these constants or tables are also called as critical values. These constants or table values are also called as critical values. So left hand side, we have the calculated value, and right hand side we have the critical value or table value or the constant value, and we always compare the calculated value with the constants, and if the relationship is calculated is less than constant, we fail to reject H naught. That is a thumb rule. So in case of T, it will be mod of T if it is less than the T critical value. The T critical value, we fail to reject H naught. In case of F, mod of F, if it is less than F critical value, we fail to reject H naught. So always remember, be it any kind of statistics or analysis, left hand side is always calculated value, right hand side is always the constant or table value, which is also called as critical value in Excel. And if the calculated is less than critical, we fail to reject H naught. That is a thumb rule. Okay. So I will try to solve an example for Z value. So H naught is mu equal to 85 for some data set. So H1 becomes mu is not equal to 85. Suppose my N is 100. So I'm taking 100 observations in my sample. X bar is 88 and standard deviation is 20. Now you can easily calculate Z, as I have told you that you know the formula for normal distribution X bar minus mu upon standard deviation and divided by root n to take care of standard error also. So if I calculate this value, suppose that value comes as 1.5. Because my X bar is 88, if I put 88 minus mu is 85, 88 minus 85 divided by standard deviation is 20, divided by root n is root 100 is 10. If I substitute all the values, my Z value comes as 1.5. That indicates for this data set, if I want to plot it in this normal distribution graph, where I have to plot is at distance 1.5 from the mean. That is the meaning of Z. Z is a distance from the mean. So if I try to plot 1.5 distance from the mean, it will come somewhere here, which is in the accept region. Why? Because 1.5 is less than 1.96. Be it 1.5 or minus 1.5, both are in accept range, which are less than 1.96. So in this case, we fail to reject H naught. That means we are going ahead with the basic assumption of mu equal to 85. So for next method is hypothesis testing using T value. So I'm considering the same problem. Mu equal to 85 is my H naught. Mu is not equal to 85 is my H1. Alpha is 0.05, and then I'm considering 25 points in my sample. My mean is 82 and standard deviation is 20. If you look at the rule remains same. If T calculated is less than T table or T critical, then we fail to reject H naught. So that is a thumb rule in analysis. So first, now we have to find both of these values. The T calculated, which is the left value, and the T table, which is the right value. We have to find both these values. Now, what is the formula for calculation of T? The formula is this, which is very same to the Z value formula. What was the formula for Z? X bar minus mu. X bar minus mu. So it is same. X bar minus mu naught. What is mu naught? Mu naught is the value of H naught. Mu naught is nothing but value of H naught. So X bar minus H naught, value of mu, divided by standard deviation upon root n. So formula is same, be it Z or be it T, formula is same. The only change is, in case of Z, we are talking about X bar and mu and standard deviation of population. If you remember the first slide of today's session, when we know population parameters, we should go for Z analysis. So sigma and mu, Greek letters represent population parameters. So if you know population parameters, go for Z analysis. Instead of mu, now I am using S, which is sample standard deviation, mu naught, which is sample mean. So if I know population, if I don't know population parameters, if I know sample parameters, I should go for T analysis. Okay, so that's why the change in the formula is only in the terms of notation. Formula is same for Z and T. All the values are with me. If I put all the values, I get T value as minus 0.75. Minus 0.75. Now, just similar to Z table, I'll tell you how to read T table now. How to read T table. So on your machine, in your phone, you can just open the T table, which I have shared on the group already. Just open the T table, and then I'll tell you how to read the T table. Have you opened the T table?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, first thing, in that T table, you will see df, which is degree of freedom, and alpha as two parameters, correct? Can you see df and alpha in your T table?
P is alpha,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it's P in this table, so that is alpha.
Yeah, P is probability. Okay, so now what is df? As we have discussed conceptually only, df stands for degree of freedom. df stands for degree of freedom. And why we are considering degree of freedom? Because we are into t-value analysis. Why we are doing t-value analysis? Because we don't know population parameter and we know sample parameter. And whenever we talk about sample, we have to consider degree of freedom that we have discussed. Whenever we talk about sample, we have to talk about degree of freedom, or we have to consider degree of freedom, and that is one less degree of freedom always for one statistic calculation. Now this is only one statistic calculation. We are doing t statistics, so we'll consider degree of freedom of -1. So how many observations we have? 25. So what will be degree of freedom value? 24. It is always n-1. We have discussed this, correct? It is always n-1. So the degree of freedom value is 24. Now alpha, or the p-value. Now, what is the significance level in our case? We have considered 0.05. But now, what is this 0.05? If I have the distribution, and if this is my accept range, so the remaining part becomes my reject range. So whenever I say 95% confidence, so this is my accept range of 95%, for example, and that's why this becomes my reject region, the remaining portion, which is 0.05. So addition of both of these regions is 0.05. Now, because I'm taking mod, be it Z calculation or T calculation, we always consider one part of the distribution. We always consider only one part of the distribution, and we try to nullify the effect of minus sign. So we don't consider the minus sign wala part. We just try to consider one part of the distribution. So we have to also take the half of 0.05, which is 0.025. So this is 0.025 and this is 0.025. That's why the addition is coming as 0.05. So what is my alpha or probability value is 0.025. So this is how you have to read the T table always. Degree of freedom as n-1, and the p value is alpha by 2. And the p value is always alpha by 2. That is how you can read T table. So now tell me, what is the value for 24, row 24 and column 0.025?
.063.
Very good. 0.059. Very good. So for n equal to 25 and df equal to 24, look at the table of df equal to 24 at 0.025. As T table is always for upper tail, consider half of alpha for T table, and the T value from table is 2.064. So what is my calculated value? Minus 0.75. So if I take a mod, it will be 0.75, which I am comparing with 2.064. So is it fitting into my rule? 0.75 less than 2.064?
Yes.
Yes. So we fail to reject H0. Okay. Now, in this case, if you want to use Excel, if you look at data analysis tab, ANOVA we are going to cover in tomorrow's session or day after tomorrow's session. Correlation covariance we have already done in Excel. Descriptive statistics we have already done in Excel. Exponential smoothing and Fourier analysis, it is a kind of mathematics based models where sine cos comes in the picture. So we are not going to cover that part. Histogram, yes, we have covered histogram. A random number generator, RNG is a simple function which generates random number, unbiased random numbers. Moving average is a very simple concept which don't need any explanation. Regression we have finished. Sampling, we are going to discuss sampling techniques, and the remaining part is T values. paired sample, two sample, assuming equal variance, unequal variance, and z-test. Z-test also is very simple, so we are not going to cover, but we are going to cover the t-test in today's session. Now, if you look at t-tests, it talks about paired. That means two samples, and two samples. All three t methods which are available in Excel are for two samples. But we are now dealing with only one sample. So how to use one of these methods for the one sample t-test? So what you have to do is you have to consider the second variable as 0. You have to consider the second variable as 0. And now go for data analysis, and that paired two sample for means, t-test paired two sample for means. Click on OK. And then variable 1 range is my actual variable. Variable 2 range is my 0 variable. Then hypothesized mean difference. What is the hypothesized mean difference? What is my H0? Mu is equal to 120, correct? Mu is equal to 120. So I have to mention that hypothesized mean difference. What is my hypothesis mean expected mean? That is my H0. That is 120. Labels, I don't have any labels in my first row. Alpha, I'll keep it as 0.05, which is the default one. And output, suppose I want to start from this location. And then I'll click on OK. So what I get is this output. Now just look at T statistics, which is very important, which is your calculated value, and T critical, which is your table value. So this is your calculated value, and this is your table value or critical value, or you can say constant. And we always compare the calculated value with the critical value. In this case, the T statistics is greater than the critical value. We reject H0. We reject H0. Okay. So this is how you can tweak the two sample mean function of data analysis for one sample, and you can calculate one sample T statistics. Two sample T test, which is based on comparison of two mean values. If two samples are taken from the same population, very important statement, if two samples are taken from same population, then they should have fairly similar mean, because as a population there is some behavior which is describing that population. And if I'm taking two samples from same population, the behavior of both the samples has to be similar in nature, not exactly same but similar in nature. That means they should have fairly similar means. I'll not say exactly equal, but fairly similar means. If two means are statistically different, if two mean values are statistically different, then the samples are likely to be drawn from two different populations. That is, they really are different. So if two means are statistically different, that means they are not part of same population, they are part of different populations. So that is what is the base concept of two sample t-test. The two sample t-test is one of the most commonly used hypothesis tests even in Six Sigma work. If you go to Six Sigma, we have discussed in short what is Six Sigma and how standard deviation is useful in Six Sigma, which is for quality control. It is applied to compare whether the average difference between two groups is really significant. Now, whenever we say about two samples or multiple samples, we always have to consider what type of data we are dealing with. Measurement scale, day 1, session number 1. So measurement scales, we have 4 measurement scales, nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So if we are dealing with interval and ratio kind of data, then we can use independent sample t-test for independent samples and paired sample t-test for related or dependent samples. And if you're dealing with ordinal or nominal data, then we have a replacement for independent sample t-test as Mann-Whitney U-test. We use Mann-Whitney U-test for independent samples if data is nominal or ordinal. And then for dependent samples, for related samples, we go for Wilcoxon test. Now both Mann-Whitney U-test and Wilcoxon test we cannot implement in Excel. So we are not going to cover Mann-Whitney and Wilcoxon in this course. we need some other tools for that. But we are going to implement independent sample t-test and paired sample t-test in this course, which are based on interval and ratio. And you can see always, whenever I say interval and ratio, we call them as parametric measures. And whenever we say nominal or ordinal, we say it is non-parametric in nature. Now, what is the meaning of parametric and non-parametric? Parametric means parameters, the population parameter. Parameter means population parameter or the calculation. The statistics are known. Day one, when I say statistics are, that means I know all the properties of the data set like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, t-value, f-value, everything. So statistics are known. And when I can calculate statistics, if the data is in numeric format. When data is in numeric format, either it has to be interval or ratio. So if data is interval or ratio, it is called as parametric test. The tests which we implement are called as parametric tests. And if data is nominal and ordinal, that means we cannot calculate mean, median, and mode. It is not possible to calculate average of male and female. Not possible. So for nominal and ordinal data, we only what operation we can do is count. We can only count number of observations, frequency. We cannot do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division with nominal and ordinal data. So we cannot know the statistics of nominal and ordinal data apart from count. So they are called as parametric test. So whatever tests we use on ordinal and nominal data, they are called as non-parametric test. So in general, Excel supports only parametric tests. Excel supports only parametric tests. That means Excel supports only interval and ratio kind of data. So what kind of data we can analyze in Excel? If it is of type interval or ratio. So that is possible in Excel. So for parametric, Mann, Whitney, Wilcoxon, there are n number of other tests for non-parametric data. We need SPSS, SAS, or some other tools which supports non-parametric functions also. So this is all about the explanation of two sample t-test, and we are going ahead with independent and paired sample t-test. Two sample t-test. Now the first case we are going to consider is paired sample. So I'll just explain the example in today's session. What is the meaning of paired sample? How to consider the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis in case of paired sample, and then how the formula for calculation is for paired sample. The actual calculation and how we can calculate using Excel and everything, that will cover in tomorrow's session. So two sample t-test. Consider the following data about understanding of a subject before using case study method. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 students in my class, and then I'm comparing the performance of my students before implementing case study method and after implementing case study method. So these are the scores which have been scored by 7 students in a test which I have kept before implementing case study method. And then I'm going ahead, I'm using the case study method for a few sessions, and then I'm conducting another test for same 7 students, and I'm noting down the scores obtained by those 7 students in second test. So these are the new scores after implementing case study method, after using case study method. So these are the scores, or this is the performance of students before using case study method, and this is the performance of students after using case study method. So that is the base concept of the paired sample. When I say paired sample or dependent sample, what is the meaning of paired or dependent sample is one object is giving me 2 observations, observation number 1 and observation number 2. One before happening something, and second after happening something, some event. So some event before happening that event, I'm getting that observation. After happening that event, I'm getting another observation. Same for observation. Data point number 2, I have before observation, after observation, before observation, after observation. Likewise, I'm keeping my objects same. The 7 objects which I'm using, the 7 students, I'm keeping the 7 students same for second test also. I'm not changing the students. I'm not changing the class. 7 students are same. My objects are same. Just what I'm doing is I'm storing the scores of first test, and I'm also storing scores of second test, and I'm comparing the scores of first test with second test just to check whether there is any positive effect of case study method. Whether there is any positive effect of case study method. If there is a positive effect, then I can conclude saying that case study method is better method for teaching this subject, maybe. So first step, I'll calculate mean of score 1. What is mean of score 1 and what is mean of score 2? So if I see mean values, the mean of score 1 is 7.29 and the mean of score 2 is 8.29. Only by looking at mean values, I am getting an impression that scores, the average score of second test compared to first test is better. 8.29 is greater than 7.29. So the average score of second test is better than average score of first test. But is this difference significant enough? The difference of 1 or whatever it is this difference significant enough to say that this difference is because of case study method? That is the main question. Okay, so we need to check whether the difference is significant enough. Whether the difference is significant enough. So above result shows score 2 mean is better than score 1, but that doesn't mean overall scores are improved, as this is just sample mean and not the population mean. So is it significant enough in terms of population? That we need to check. I'll just show you how we create the formula for sample two sample t statistics. So this is our problem. So let x pre and x post be the data. This is my x pre data and this is my x post data. So what is the difference? If I want to calculate difference, D stands for difference. So D will be equal to x post minus x pre. So difference will be x post minus x pre. So indirectly what I am doing is I am creating a third column. I am creating a third column D where I am storing all the difference values. So 7 minus 8 is minus 1, 9 minus 9 is 0, 6 minus 9 is minus 3, 8 minus 10 is minus 2, minus 1, 1 and minus 1. So these are my D values. So compute D value. Once I compute D value, just consider this column as one sample T statistics. Just consider this one difference column, D column, as one sample T statistics and you'll get the answer. Simplest way. Or even if the problem is of paired sample T test, we can calculate the difference and then we can go ahead with one sample T statistics method. But how? There is a small difference in the actual one sample T statistics and this format of difference column in terms of one sample T statistics. So we'll come to that. What is my H naught? What is my H naught in this case? If it is a paired sample kind of case or problem, what can be my H naught? H naught means naught has to be there in my statement. So my statement says there is no significant difference. There is no significant difference in the mean of score 1 and the mean of score 2. Will be my null hypothesis statement. There is no significant difference in the mean score of test 1 and the mean score of test 2. That means mu pre is equal to mu post. There is no significant difference in pre and post mean values. That means mu pre equal to mu post, or I can say H naught is mu post minus mu pre equal to 0, or either mu pre minus mu post equal to 0, anything. Correct? That means difference is 0. That means difference is 0. Expected difference is 0. But I am having some differences. Minus 1, 0, minus 3, minus 2, minus 1, 1 and 1, minus 1. My expected difference is 0, but I am having deviation from my expected mean. In this case it is minus 1, in this case it is minus 3 and so on. So I am just trying to calculate the standard deviation, nothing else. So what my mu D is, mu post minus mu pre. So my mu D becomes equal to 0, difference is 0, that becomes my H naught, which I need to test. Okay. Now what is the formula for one sample T test, normal formula? We have to just tweak that formula. This is my formula for one sample T test, considering only one sample. Now in this case, what we have is, what is this? This is nothing but mu d. This is nothing but mu d. So I'll just replace that with d bar. I'll just replace the numerator by d bar, that is the mean of only one variable, which is difference variable, d variable, d bar. Because the mu 0, what is mu 0? I'm replacing x bar by d bar, but mu 0 is the value of mu d, that is 0 itself. So it is as good as adding d bar minus 0. So d bar minus 0 is d bar itself. So I'll just write d bar in the numerator. What is my denominator? Standard deviation. In this case, it will be standard deviation of the d column divided by root n remains as it is. So this becomes my formula for paired sample t test.